The number is $2,314,887. You didn't inherit it. You didn't sell a company. You worked at the same place for 31 years and packed your own lunch. Nobody at work knew. Your neighbors didn't know. Your own kids didn't know. Not really. This is not a story about luck. It's not a story about talent or timing or knowing the right people. It's a story about a particular kind of patience that most people never develop because nobody ever told them it was an option. You grew up in a house where money was a source of stress, not strategy. You learned what money meant before you learned what money could do. And those are two completely different educations. At 18, you got a job, not a career, a job. You showed up on time. You did what was asked. You came home tired. You weren't thinking about compound interest. You were thinking about bus fare. But something happened at 23. A coworker, older guy, quiet, drove a used car, brought coffee in a thermos, said something you almost didn't hear. He said, "Put $50 a month away and don't touch it." That's it. That's all he said. You laughed. $50. You were barely keeping the lights on. But you didn't forget it. And 3 months later, when a small raise came through, you remembered the napkin. You opened a brokerage account. Not because you knew what you were doing, because $50 felt like an amount you could afford to lose. You bought a low-cost index fund. Not a hot stock, not crypto. A plain index fund, because someone in a forum said that's what boring rich people do. And then you did something almost nobody does. You forgot about it. Not because you were disciplined, because life was loud and the account was quiet and the $50 just kept leaving your account automatically every month before you could think about spending it. Here's what was happening in the background. The machine was running. In year one, $50 a month became $600. With a 7% average return, that $600 earned about $42 in gains. $42. You couldn't buy a nice dinner with that. But those $42, they also started earning interest, not just on your original money, on themselves. That's the part the school system never taught you. Compound interest is not a math concept. It's a time concept. And time is the only resource that costs you nothing to invest. You were 25. Your coworker Derek just leased a BMW. He showed everyone at lunch. He was very excited. You drove a 2009 Honda Civic with a sun-bleached bumper. It started every morning. That was enough. Derek's BMW payment was $580 a month. Over 5 years, that was $34,800 in payments, plus interest, for a car that lost 40% of its value the day he drove it off the lot. You were not judging Derek. You just quietly did not want to be Derek. By 28, you bumped your contribution to $150 a month. Not because a book told you to, because you got a small raise and the extra went somewhere before it became something else. The trick, if you can call it that, was automation. The money moved before you saw it. The decision was made once, and then it was just a thing that happened, like sunrise. Meanwhile, the broader system was doing what it always does. Inflation was quietly eroding the purchasing power of anyone who just held cash. Every dollar sitting in a savings account earning 0.01% was losing ground. Not dramatically, quietly, a slow, invisible leak. The bank was paying you next to nothing to hold your money, then lending that same money out at 6, 8, 12%. The spread between those two numbers, that's the machine's margin, not yours. You weren't fighting the machine. You were redirecting your money through a part of it that worked for you instead of against you. At 31, you got married. You told your partner about the account on your third date. They thought it was unusual that you were talking about this on a third date. She didn't leave, which meant she understood something important, even if she couldn't name it yet. The account balance at 31, $27,400. Not glamorous, not a number you'd put in a speech, but it was real and it was growing. Your college friend Marcus got a tech job at 30. He started telling everyone he was going to retire by 40. He had a Robinhood account and a strong opinion about NFTs. By 35, Marcus was still working. The NFTs were gone. The Robinhood account had taken 3 significant hits. He was not retiring by 40. You said nothing. You never said "I told you so." That's not what this is about. At 34, your employer introduced a 401k match. 50 cents on every dollar, up to 6% of your salary. You maxed it immediately. This is important The employer match is free money, not metaphorically free. Literally, your employer hands you 50 cents for every dollar you contribute, and most people in that office left it on the table. 63% of Americans do not contribute enough to get their full employer match. They are turning down a raise every single month and calling themselves underpaid. You weren't smarter than them. You just said yes to a form and chose the higher number on a drop-down menu. Kids came at 36 and 38. Everything got harder and more expensive and more beautiful and more exhausting all at once. There were months you dropped contributions. You're not a robot, life pressed in, but you always came back. That's the part the internet version of this story always skips. The months you missed, the dip, the restart. Consistency is not perfection. Consistency is coming back. At 40, your balance crossed $100,000 for the first time. $100,000. It took 17 years to get here, and it will take 4 years, just 4, to get to $200,000 with no change in contribution at all, just the math running forward. This is the part they don't put on the brochure. The beginning is slow, painfully, almost insultingly slow, and then after a long time it gets fast. Not all at once, but noticeably. At 42, your salary was $58,000 a year. You were not a six-figure earner. You never became one. That matters. Because this story is not about income, it's about the gap. The gap between what you earn and what you spend. That's the only number that actually builds wealth, not income. The gap. Your neighbor bought a boat at 43. It sat in the driveway under a blue tarp for most of the year. He talked about the lake constantly. The boat cost $28,000, financed at 9% over 7 years. Total cost with interest, $38,600. He went to the lake 4 times. You went to the lake too. You borrowed a kayak from someone at work. You said it was enough. It was. This is the psychology of it. Most displays of wealth are not wealth. They are the consumption of future wealth. They are the borrowing of a feeling you haven't earned yet, at a cost you haven't calculated. The system profits every time you borrow a feeling. That's not a conspiracy. That's just the business model. At 47, the portfolio crossed $250,000. You didn't tell anyone. Not because you were ashamed, because you understood something about silence and safety and the way people change when they think you have something worth taking. There is a specific kind of pressure that comes from a working-class family when one person starts pulling ahead. It doesn't always look like support. Sometimes it looks like requests. You helped when you could. You set a boundary when you couldn't. The boundary was not popular, it was necessary. This is the invisible tax on first-generation wealth builders that no personal finance book ever mentions. The social cost, the relational friction, the guilt engineered by proximity. You didn't abandon your family. You didn't disappear. You just refused to go back to zero on their timeline. And that, for some of them, felt like abandonment. At 50, the market dropped. Not a correction, a real drop. 27% in 8 months. You watched your balance drop from $390,000 to $284,000 over 6 months. On paper, you lost $106,000. You did not sell. This is easier to say than it is to do. At 50, looking at a 6-figure paper loss, the instinct to stop the bleeding is overwhelming. Most retail investors sell at the bottom, not because they are stupid, because the pain of watching a loss is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. It's called loss aversion, and it is hardwired into your brain by evolution. The system relies on this. Volatility is not a bug. For institutional investors who buy when retail investors panic, it is a feature. You didn't buy more. You didn't need to be a hero. You just held on and waited, which is its own kind of courage when everything around you is screaming to run. 14 months later, the portfolio was back at $410,000, higher than before the crash. And the people who sold at the bottom, most of them bought back in near the top because that's when it felt safe again. They paid the panic tax. At 53, you started increasing contributions more aggressively. The kids were older, the house was mostly paid off, the margin widened. This is another thing nobody maps clearly. The back half of the accumulation phase is where most of the wealth is actually built, because you have more to contribute, more already compounding, and fewer lifestyle liabilities dragging at the gap. At 55, the balance hit $700,000. $700,000. The compounding was now doing more work each year than you were. The money was earning more annually in returns than your entire annual salary. This is the moment the books talk about but can't quite describe. When your money starts earning at the scale of a salary, the entire architecture of your life quietly shifts. You were still going to work, same job, same building, same thermos. But you are now choosing to go. And that distinction, invisible to everyone around you, changed everything. Freedom is not a destination, it's a ratio. The ratio of what you have to what you need. And when that ratio crosses a certain threshold, the whole world looks different. At 57, your manager called you in. They wanted you to take on more. More hours, more travel, more responsibility. The raise they offered was small. You declined, politely, without panic. You said no to extra work for the first time in your professional life, and the word came out steady. This is what a $700,000 portfolio does that a salary never can. It gives you a no, not a loud no. A quiet, grounded, nothing to prove no. Your salary never broke $60,000. Let that sit for a moment. You were never in the top income bracket. You were never a doctor or a lawyer or a founder. You ran your gap, you automated, you held, and you did not stop. At 60, the balance crossed $1 million for the first time. There was no sound, no bell, no notification. The number just sat there in the same font it always used. Your heart was loud, though, just for a moment. You did not call anyone. You closed the laptop and went to bed. And this is where the story actually diverges from what people imagine. Becoming a millionaire didn't feel like an arrival. It felt like confirmation that you had been on the right road. There is a myth that wealth changes you. Sometimes it does, but not always, and not the way people expect. What it changed for you was not your tastes or your habits. It changed your relationship with fear. An unexpected medical bill landed at 61, $14,000 after insurance. A decade earlier, that number would have meant a second job, or borrowed money, or sleepless nights. Now, it was a line item. This is financial security, not a number on a screen. The ability to absorb the unexpected without it becoming a crisis. That is the real product you spent 37 years building. At 63, you retired, not with a party or a speech. You submitted the paperwork on a Tuesday and came home and made lunch. The balance on that Tuesday, 23/14, $8.07. Let's walk through what that means in practice. At a 4% withdrawal rate, the standard conservative benchmark, $2.3 million generates $92,000 a year in income, without touching the principal, indefinitely. $92,000 a year, more than you ever earned working, for doing nothing, for simply having waited. Derek from the parking lot is still working at 63, not because he didn't earn enough. He earned more than you for most of his career. He earned more, spent more, saved the difference, which was close to nothing. Income is not wealth. Income is water. Wealth is what you keep in the bucket. And most people have a hole in their bucket the size of their ego. What does $2.3 million actually look like in a life? It looks like Tuesday lunch. It looks like saying no. It looks like not checking your phone when a bill arrives. It looks like choosing. It does not look like a yacht. It does not look like a watch that tells you something about your taste. It looks like Tuesday. There is a version of this story where you got lucky. A bull market ran longer than expected. Inflation hit your mortgage favorably. The timing was right. These are true. But the market has also dropped, crashed, corrected, and panicked across that same time frame. The people who were in the market and held got the luck. The people who got out didn't. The luck was not in the market's direction. The luck was in starting, because the system is built to make you wait until you have enough to invest, and that moment never comes unless you decide it already has. If you are 23 and you invest $50 a month for 40 years at a 7% average return, you will have approximately $131,000. But if you wait 10 years and start at 33, that same $50 becomes just $61,000. 10 years costs you $70,000. 10 years of waiting cost you $70,000, and you didn't have to do anything special. You just had to not stop. You built 2.3 million on a working class income because you understood one thing that the system never advertises. The system runs on your impatience. Your willingness to wait was the only weapon you needed. Nobody at work knew. Your neighbors didn't know. The machine kept running. And on a Tuesday, when everyone else was at their desk, you made lunch at home and let the numbers sit on the screen, and that was enough.